welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're talking about the Palmetto State Armory PSA AK-74. Well, before we really get into that, I want to go over a little bit of a history of some of the AK-74s that have come into the United States. Because I'm going to come right out and say that the AK-74 is my favorite of all of the AK family of weapons. Around 1994, 95 or so, I remember was the first time that the AK-74 made an appearance in the United States, and they came out of Romania. And I was stoked when they came in. It was, finally I wanted to get my hands on one. So I got one of the first ones that came in. It was during the Bandit course, so you had a thumb hole stock on it. They were Romac 2, I think it was. And, it came in, there was no muzzle brake on it or anything like that on it. But I grabbed one, and I was ecstatic. A few years later, these guns came in for a little while. I sent the rifle back to K-Bar, and K-Bar was able to basically put the proper front sight base on, put the proper muzzle, the AK-74 muzzle brake on it, welded it on so it couldn't come off, and put the newly made American-made stock set on because we had 922R, we had our 7 parts, we could make the gun look like it was supposed to legally. Well, over the years, we had some coming in from different countries. In fact, what you see here, this is a Sega that came in, and this came out of Mark Krebs. Now, I've talked about Mark Krebs quite a bit in the past. This man works with AKs like Picasso works with oils. He does a beautiful job. This rifle here originally came in as one of the standard Sega Sporters. It came into Mark Krebs. He reconfigured it so you could put the pistol grip. And it's the configuration that you see here. The only thing that was different of the original rifle was it had the American-made stock set on it that was manufactured, the black polymer. And I happened to be making a trip to Ukraine a while back and was able to find a brand new set of Russian wood for it. And here you go. This is an absolute gorgeous rifle. This is a quintessential AK-74, the basic rifle model, as you can see, with the full-length stock. So this is one of my favorite. However, there is one that I do prefer over this one, which would be the AK-74. Now, the AK-74 was a quintessential rifle that you saw by the Soviets using in Afghanistan. You had the triangular stock. This one was set up just like in Afghanistan era. You have the sling, you have the tourniquet, as well as you have one of the Russian bandages. This was the way that the soldiers had carried them over in Afghanistan. We also happen to have a couple extra of these bandages I brought back with me from the Ukraine for sale. If you'd like one, please email Heather H. Bartacci at smallarmsolutions.com. Now, this rifle has a little interesting story behind it because up until 2015, I lived in the occupied state of New York where everything was illegal still. The assault weapon ban never sunset there. They had their own. So when I moved to Texas, this, again, as I said, AK-74 was my favorite. So I wanted one of these immediately. Well, I got a hold of Vince Buckles. If those of you who watched Sons of Guns, Vince Buckles was a gunsmith on there. He left before the unpleasantness took place with Will Hayden, and he has a shop in Gonzales, Louisiana, Basic Connect Development. And I called Vince and I said, I want an AK-74 and I want a Soviet era Afghan war era. Well, he built this up for me. The only thing I had changed on this one was specifically more Soviet wood that I brought back from the Ukraine. And this, of all models of the AK-74, this is my favorite of all models. This is the traditional Afghan era. Well, as the time went on, we started getting a little bit more AK-74s being imported into the U.S. And one of the most popular ones was what we see here. This is the Bulgarian AK-74. Now, this is the AK-74 M pattern where you have the side-folding polymer stock as opposed to the triangular shape stock. And these are absolutely gorgeous made rifles. Now, unfortunately, these are no longer in production. I had opportunity overseas on many occasions to go to trade shows, to talk to manufacturers of guns all over the world. And I happened to sit with one of the engineers from Arsenal and had a chance to talk to him. And basically, Bulgaria, they hate AK-74s. They hate the 5.45. They had always preferred the 7.62 by 39. It had a lot to do with their detest for being associated with the Soviet Union or Russia at the time, but they never liked the 5.45 caliber, so they never really produced too many of them. And over the last couple of years, these rifles here completely dried up. So given the current state of matters in the United States right now, if you were to want to get an AK-74, unfortunately, you are very, very limited. Due to the fact we have importation bans now on Russia, no more Segas are coming in, no more Mulats. And with Arsenal no longer importing the AK-74s, that's done. So right now, your biggest opportunity to get an AK-74 is just to purchase parts kits, and then to have one built on American-made receivers with American-made barrels. Century stopped importing AK-74 type variants from Romania around 2013. They still did import some parts kits that you could get from other distributors throughout the industry. Right now, Atlantic Firearms is importing some parts kits, and they're building up rifles on American-made barrels and parts kits, but they're very, very, very rare. So right now, the only real viable option you have to buy a new AK-74 is Palmetto State Armory. The rifle that you see here is their classic side-folding stock model. This is black. They also offer them in plum. They offer several models. The first model they offer is the PSA AK-74 Classic with the ALG trigger and JL billet extended rail. This would be more of the modernized version of the AK-74, with the 1913 rails, so you can mount accessories. Then you have the PSA AK-74 Classic with a triangular side-folding stock. Now this is offered with stocks in black, and plum, redwood, and nutmeg colors. Then what we have here is the PSA AK-74 Classic side-folding stock, and this is offered in both plum as well as the black. And then, of course, what we have is the standard PSA AK-74 Classic rifle, which you have the polymer stock. Now, as you see, I've got two different rifles here. Both these rifles are the exact same rifle, with the exception of the side-folding stock on the classic AK-74 side-folding. Everything from the stock forward is the exact same on the two rifles. I was fortunate enough to get my hands on one of each of these models to be able to test. Now, the testing that I did, very little was done with this rifle here, just because of the fact that, quite frankly, this other one that I bought. So I was more interested in doing the testing on the rifle that I bought. I did put a few rounds for this one just to guarantee function, but that was pretty much all I had done with it. But you do have two different versions. This one obviously is more comfortable for someone with longer arms. The USA stock, which is a little bit longer than the standard Russian ones. Now, I will say one thing about this rifle: there is one universal complaint. Doesn't come with a cleaning rod. You think a company who could build a rifle like this could build a cleaning rod, but that's not something they got around to. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the AK-74 Classic side folder here, the one that I bought. Now, I do have a cleaning rod on this. Thanks to Michiko, or William Trotter over at Ozark Bear Arms, was able to find one of these in his pile, so my AK-74 would look proper. So what PSA has done, they've made a complete 100% made AK-74 or also AK-47 AKM type rifles. These are all 100% USA made. Every part that you see, there are no parts on here that are surplus. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start from the rear and go forward. Now, of course, 922R compliant doesn't apply because this is a 100% US made rifle, but we do have a standard side folding type stock on here. Now I can't close it up because of the optic, which I'm going to get to here in a moment. So you have your latch in the back. Now, looking at the receiver, one of the things with a stamp receiver rifle that you look for is the quality of the rivets. Now, looking at the outside, one of the things that we're going to look for is ones that aren't flush, ones that are caved in. Those are the things that we tend to look for. And looking at the rifle we have here, we see no deformation on any of the rivets anywhere on the rifle. They have done a beautiful job for as far as that's concerned. So taking a look at the safety, or the safety we have on here, we do have a upgraded type safety where you have the shelf on here, where you're able to drop down to manipulate it easier. It's one of the changes that we do have. Standard grip. If you look here, we do have a Magpul PMag. All the PSA rifles come with the Magpul PMags. Now, looking at the forward of the handguards, we have a standard synthetic polymer handguard. The barrel on the AK-74s is 4150 chrome moly vanadium, which has a nitride finish. Now, if you look at the AK-47s they have, these are cold hammer forged FN barrels that are chrome plated. Now, one of the issues that comes up with the 5.45 caliber is very few companies actually make it. So what happens is they can go to, PSA can go to FN and say, hey, I want a 760x39 barrel made. They're already making them. They're not making a 5.45. So Palmetto State Armory had to manufacture this barrel in-house, and of course they use a nitrating process. I'm much more of a fan of the chrome-plated manganese phosphate. Now, there's a lot of debate on which one's better, which one lasts longer. All I can say is military-grade barrels are going to be generally cold hammer forged, and they're going to be chrome plated. So that's probably the only really area of contention that I had with it. You do have bayonet lugs on here, and we see the traditional AK-74 muzzle brake as well. Now, looking at the front sight base on here, one of the issues you have with all AKs when they come in, they come into the country or they're manufactured at all, is are they canted? A lot of the lower quality rifles that you'll see coming in, you'll see your sights are cranked all the way to one side or the other because they're canted. Now, both of these rifles I've had from Palmetto State Armory and the AK-74, neither one, they both have been straight. I've not had to really adjust the front sight post at all on any of these. The AK-70 or AK-47 that we had also was pretty much in the middle. There was no issues with them being canted, so that was sort of a big deal. Now, looking towards the rear, we have forged bolt carrier, bolt, and trunnion. So we have three components that are forged, which gives you better strength. Now, when we did our test firing, I wanted to see how this thing was going to shoot more for accuracy. So I wanted to put an optic on it. Now, one of the things about optics is you need to find a mount. So I did some internet research to see, who made the best mounts that we could find, and the mount that I came up with was the Midwest Industries 1913 rail mount. So as you can see, we have a full 1913 rail on top, and one of the special things about this mount is when it locks on, you have an adjustment to it. Now, as you know, that when it comes to anything made in the Warsaw Pact countries, there's no single TDP like you have for an M16 or an M4. Parts are not parts. There's a lot of variations to them. You have higher end tolerances, lower end tolerances, and you have ones that are totally off the tolerances to begin with. Midwest Industries, when they developed this mount, they realized that was an issue. So what they did was they made an adjustment for the mount that goes onto the rail. So you can either tighten it for a lower end of the tolerance rail, or you can open it up for one that's on the higher end and then some. So you would be able to be sure that you'd be able to lock this down so it's secure and it did not move. This is the main thing that I really preferred about the Midwest Industries mount was its ability to adapt to whatever the tolerance may be on the rail. Now, I did use an optic on here, and the optic I chose here was the primary arms. I just had a chance to mess around with some of the primary arms, so you're going to be seeing more on it. This happens to be the 1-6x24 Raptor. Now, one of the mistakes that I did make with this scope is the mount that I used here was the Aero Precision lightweight mount. This was designed for an AR-15, so you could co-witness sights on it. So this sits up quite high. So this was relatively uncomfortable because how high I had to sit my head. If I had to do it over again, I would have gotten my hand on some very low rings and put the scope on there. We're going to take the scope off and take a look at the inside here. Now, in order to remove this, you have to push upward on the button and then drop downward on the latch. And that pops the scope assembly right off. For disassembly, this is typical AK type rifle. Check, be sure it's empty. Inward, your top cover. Push inward on the recoil spring, lift out. Pull back on the bolt carrier. Rotate the bolt out of the cam track. Pop that right out. Then remove the gas tube. Lift upward and push out. Now, looking in the inside here, we have a standard AKM type single hook trigger. Now, one of the things I was very pleased to see, which I did not see on several other manufacturers who were supposedly much higher end, these are all brand new springs. A lot of the other ones that we've come across in the past were surplus springs they're putting in these rifles. Now, as we see, we have the forged trunnion. We have all the rivets, as you can see in here, are done very, very well. As I said, there's nothing in here that I've been able to fault with the production of this rifle, the manufacturing process. We can see our ejector in here, which is part of the rifle. Now, looking over on the side here, we can see the scope mount. Now, if you don't have the scope mount on there, you have the side folding stock. To release the stock, you push inward on the button here, which is the lock. That opens that back up. More forward, you can see we do have the heat shield on here. Everything is drilled and pinned as you would expect. Now, looking at the bolt carrier, Machining is very, very well compared to mostly what you're going to see on the outside of the United States, where you have less sophisticated machining techniques. You don't really see too many machine marks on there at all. Same thing with the bolt. Very well made. You can hear your firing pin in there moving freely. Again, one of the other neat things that they did here is they put on serial numbers. So if you look at the side, you have the serial number and a mark on here. You have a matching serial number on the bolt carrier. You also have it on the bolt. You have it on the back of the receiver cover. So to get more with the authenticity of the AK type rifles where they have matching serial numbers. So for reassembly, take your gas tube, drop it into place. Lock it in place. Then you can see we have a nice stainless steel piston on here as well. Everything's properly pinned in place. Drop our bolt into the carrier. We rotate so it gets into the cam track, so it locks and unlocks. Switch your recoil spring. Now, one of the interesting things when you compare the two of these, if you look at the standard rifle pattern, you have an AKM type receiver cover on it. If you look at the folding stock version, you see you have more of the AKM style smooth receiver cover on it. That's one of the interesting changes they made. If you look at the front sights here, you have the standard 1,000 yard adjustable rear sight, which is extremely optimistic for the range of the 5.45 cartridge. Now looking at magazines, we had tried a few different magazines with this. We had the Magpul P-Mag, which it came with. We had the East German. We had Bulgarian, Romanian. So we had a few, and Russian. So we had several different types of magazines that functioned flawlessly. So what we're doing now is we're going to the range and we're going to see how they shoot. Well, overall, we fired probably about 1,500 rounds out of these two rifles. The standard rifle probably had about 500, and this one had well over 1,000. And there's absolutely no malfunctions of any sort. We tried a few different kinds of ammunition. I'd had some of the Hornady, which is probably with 60 grain AMAX, which was undoubtedly the most accurate of the ammunition that we tested. The best grip was obtained at 50 yards at 0.87 inches. Due to the range conditions I had at that time, I wasn't going to walk down to the 100-yard due to the flooding that we had down there. So we did the 50-yard range with the optic. So very, very pleased with that. We also had, of course, Silver Bear and Wolf. Again, no malfunctions of any sort. Overall, right now, if you want to buy a new AK-74, Palmetto State probably is one of your only options. And I have to say, looking at the rifle, very well made. A lot of experts out there will claim that if you want to get a good AK-74 or AK at all, it has to be imported. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. If you look at the manufacturing capability we have in the United States with our advanced CNC machines and everything, we have the ability to make much more precise and much better versions of the rifle than they do overseas. Some manufacturers do it better than others. I have to say that Palmetto State Armory has done their homework on the manufacturing process. They're making very, very good rifles. We're looking at an MSRP of around, you're looking between $700 to $900 between the versions that you would want. They're giving you a very good value. 5.45 ammunition is still available. That's one of the cartridges, because it's not nearly as popular as some of the other cartridges, you're still able to find some of it. I do hope to see to find more American-made companies making it in the near future, but it's a relatively difficult cartridge to make because you generally have to use a steel cartridge case because of the characteristics. So I hope you all did enjoy this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share. Thank you.